Hello, welcome to Be Make Do, a Soul Makers podcast, where we talk about what it takes to pursue your calling with spiritual wholeness and creative freedom. I'm your host, Lisa Smith, here with my producer, Dan ABH.
Hello, everyone.
This season on the Be Make Do podcast, we've created something really fun that I think you're going to enjoy. A quiz for you to find out your artist archetype. And by that, it's not like putting you in a box to decide this is the type of artist you are and we know everything about you. It's a fun tool to look at the things that you enjoy. Why do you create to begin with? What makes you excited? What brings you to the studio on a regular basis? And here's the reason why. It's always fun to look at ourselves and find out who we are and, see ourselves mirrored back to ourselves. But what we're trying to do with this is try to ask some deeper questions about our motivations for why we create. And here's why. Because many times when we think about being an artist, especially when other people think about artists in general, we tend to kind of have this overarching narrative of what that means, what that looks like. And we as artists can even get trapped into that ourselves and feel like success for me looks like somebody else's path of success, or very binary thinking. It's either fame and fortune or nothing. When do I know that I'm good enough? When do I know that I've made an impact? But it becomes difficult when we're constantly striving for what's next, increasing our influence, increasing our likes and our shares and all of that kind of stuff. Our fulfillment can get left in the dust. So we're proposing that we start with what motivates us to create to begin with. Who are we? What are our special gifts and talents and how we see the world? This is kind of going into that make what you were created to make, understanding how and what you love to create, and then thinking of that as a starting place for building a career, for fulfillment, and also being able to make a living. And I believe that those two things are possible. Maybe not in the same way that we typically think about it, but starting with what you desire and what kind of is what makes you tick as a creative person is going to be the path, the best way to start out thinking about how to create the career for you.
Right. And it's not even just like a helpful tool. It's just a practice of trying to think about what is motivating you to create, what is motivating you and how you create. When you create. And that's a different way of looking at things. And I really think that if we all started to think that way, then this notion of how to get ahead and why am I feeling left behind and FOMO and all that will start to dissipate, I think, because it's almost like a spiritual practice too, to understand how you are working, where that's coming from, what is motivating you.
Yeah.
Because motivation is different than wanting to just be like somebody else.
Exactly. Or prove to somebody that you are a legit singer, writer,
right. Well,
dancer,
I'm still going to do
actor.
that, but I think,
you are legit. Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of come to that crossroads. I know for me, I went to school for acting. That's all I ever wanted to do. And in my mind, what it meant to be a successful actor or theater person, well, for me, it became a love of film. To go to LA and become, as to get my Oscar. Like that's what it means. And as a younger person, it's either that or you're a failure.
Yeah.
That's a pretty ridiculous bar, by the way, anyway, for what it looks like to be a successful actor. But not only that, over time, as I kind of found myself being drawn to other kinds of things like creating community or creating experiences, using theatrical tools or improvisation or just designing kind of almost like sets, like creating a space to invite people into to have an experience of their own. I had a crisis of like, I'm not really an actor anymore. I haven't been on stage doing that in a while. Who am I? What am I?
Right.
And I had to kind of mourn that a little bit, but then also realize, well, wait a second, I'm doing what I love to do. So it's not like I'm doing something wrong. And actually, I am using all of those things. I've just created a whole new way of doing it for myself.
Right. And again, like it's not like a personality thing, right? It's not like an introvert, extrovert. And
Right.
I remember when we were putting this together, and to me, I only thought there would only be like 2, but there's 6.
Yeah, right. We've got the imaginative visionary,
We've got the maker,
the mystic,
the soul healer,
the storyteller,
and the prophetic
critic. That's right. We remembered them all.
We got them all.
That's right. Yes, we've narrowed it down to 6 different types, archetypes that kind of exhibit the characteristics of different parts of our personalities. And some people will take the quiz and be absolutely one of the archetypes. That they'll say, this nails me. This is who I am. Other people might be like 20% each of those.
Yeah.
And sometimes we kind of switch around depending on what part of ourselves or what part of our career or our life we're in. So yeah, it's not meant to put you in a box, but it is meant to kind of get you thinking, what do I hope to get out of this? What do I want from this? Where is God calling me to? And to let go of ideas of patterns for success, the systems that are set up for having influence in the arts or making a life in the arts are really, really difficult to navigate and not set up for a lot of people to do well. But the arts are meant to be a part of everyday life, in every sphere of life, in every place on the planet. So I think that's part of what we're hoping with Soulmakers, is also to encourage people to not just think about that 0.1% tiny sphere of those who are like, who've quote unquote made it, but to really think about the arts as a gift that we give to the world, and to be empowered to do that all over the place, all the time, in lots of different ways.
Right. Well, let's get started with our first archetype.
All right. So we're going to start off our series today by talking about the imaginative visionary. The way we're going to do this season is we'll have one episode where we talk about that archetype, what it is, some of the challenges that archetype faces, and then what you need to thrive, and maybe some more ways of thinking about how you can build your career in a way that's fulfilling for you. And then we'll have a follow-up episode where we talk with a creative, an artist, somebody in an industry who fits that archetype, can relate to that, about what motivates them, and just kind of hear from them about how they've navigated their career and any advice that they might have for us. So I think it'll be a really nice way to explore this, and hopefully to give us some tools to think maybe a little more expansively about what it means to be a quote unquote successful artist. So, like I said, we're starting with the imaginative visionary, not the
imaginary visionary.
Right. Which is another great way to say it.
They might feel that way sometimes.
I do think that's probably true.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this archetype, because that joke may make sense soon.
Right. Well, the imaginative visionary is somebody who is really all about the big picture, the big ideas. In fact, the ideas themselves may feel more important sometime than an actual product or end result. They're really the people who can kind of take a look at a lot of different pieces and see how things might be different, how there might be a path to move from one way of being to another way of being. So they're all about vision and thinking about creative paths to get from point A to point B. They're usually the person in the group who's got like the big ideas. They've got a different way of thinking about things. That's basically just where they live. Head in the cloud. No, not head in the clouds. I'm saying this because that's probably where I kind of identify with a lot of what sort of drives me. But they really do believe that, as from an artistic standpoint, that art and these new ideas, innovation have a way to impact the world in positive and hopeful ways. So yeah, that's basically the Imaginative Visionary. Do you know any Imaginative Visionaries in your life, Dan?
You?
So I should ask you what the challenges are.
Yeah.
What's the challenge of living?
Another thing I would point out too is how, in my opinion, how deeply spiritual this archetype is. How they're working, how they're not only how they're working, but where they're working from and what's motivating them. Spiritual AF, just very spiritual. And I think that's really important for this specific type of archetype.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is true, again, because of the focus on the bigger picture, the bigger ideas, and seeing how things are connected. And so that lends itself to this sense of spiritual purpose.
Right.
Or connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. And this archetype isn't like getting up in the morning and running out the door and going to like make something or but they are sort of like sitting there thinking and deeply thinking of what is the need for the culture? What is the need for this? Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that person that just jumps out the door and is like ready to rock. But maybe that archetype or that sort of artist or that personality, if you will, they just want to do something.
Yeah. That's great. So that starts to get to why and how knowing about your motivations can help you make choices to find a fulfilling career path. Because if you know that it's the ideas and creating something new that's going to excite you and keep you creating, then you probably want to stay away from a situation where you're going to get locked into one thing for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I even as an actor, for me, like a really great gig would be to get a role in a musical on Broadway or a touring production and tour for months and months and months and months or years even, doing 2 to 4 shows a day. I mean, that's solid work. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would hate that because it would lose its freshness very quickly for me. I love rehearsal. I love the process. I love sitting down with a new script and a new idea and getting behind it and fleshing it out and creating the world around that kind of stuff. But it's almost like, and performance is awesome too, but over time that becomes really difficult to sustain. Or like even teaching acting or something like that would become difficult over time because it's just the same thing. Even though there's newness in it, it's starting a new project. Being able to own that about myself has been really helpful, to say, I have to do things that have an end, and then I'm able to start something new.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that only these vocations are or you can be a imaginative visionary, not imaginary visionary. But some of the vocations that I think of at the top of my head, because I am not this archetype, is like a director, a producer, a writer.
Yeah.
The ones that are creating the world because they see it in a completely different way. And they're trying to connect these pieces and bring people into it for the greater good.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that stand out to me is this idea that this archetype believes in the power of art, that art can change lives and impact the world. So it's not just about creating the play or the movie or the production or the exhibit. It's that, and also how it's going to change lives, change culture. But at the same time, I'm wondering what the challenges that this one has, because I can think of a few, but I'd love to pick your brain. Let's talk about the challenges.
Well,
tell me about your issues, since this is your archetype.
Well, it started when I was 3. No. Well, what you just said is right on to go into the challenges. So there is this desire to make a difference in the world, right? Or this belief that if only this vision could be realized, then things would be different. But that becomes a challenge when reality doesn't live up to your vision. And that's really common. That's common for everybody, but especially I think somebody in this particular archetype, not being able to see strong results or immediate effect of what you do can be very, very discouraging. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have, well, for one thing, to have connections with people who can help make your vision a reality. Right. So we were talking about the maker who gets up in the morning and just goes to do the thing and has the proficiency to get it done. It's great when you have somebody that you can work with who can take your ideas and help to make it a reality. So realizing that you need to be a part of a team as an imaginative visionary, you need to surround yourself with other creative people and learn to be able to articulate your vision in a way that other people can grab hold of that, make it their own, and help to bring it into fruition. But then also from, I think, a spiritual side, like you were saying, is to realize that the things that we create and contribute, the ideas, the pieces we put out into the world, it's almost like once you start getting that ball rolling, it is out of your hands. To recognize the only thing you can control is how you articulate that, what you put out into the world, but you can't control the end result. That's really in God's hands. And to understand that we're working in concert really with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And to follow that leading and to trust that your role is to be faithful in your part, but not to judge yourself on perfection by perfectionistic standards.
Right. And it seems like just by hearing that, some issues that this archetype could run into is maybe issues with following through with everything, because it's such a gigantic idea, and maybe not having these other archetypes in your life or help to see it through. And maybe not being able to logistically do the steps like we were talking about the maker, but also like feels like anxiety could also, the weight of it as you really get into it could be probably crippling.
Yeah, that's a really good point, to feel like it's so important that you're afraid to put something out there because people might not accept it or might not get it, or it might not be good enough. All of these things can then keep you from just putting stuff out there.
Yeah. Does it feel like, once it's going, it's sort of like, oh Lord, what did I get myself into type of thing?
Yeah, well, I think there can be that because, and you were talking about following through, and it's, it depends on your personality within an archetype. Then there's all kinds of different personalities and strengths and gifts and stuff like that. So it depends on, what disciplines you've given yourself and you've worked on, and probably somebody who's older and learned a lot of life lessons has probably built up their capacity for things that maybe somebody just starting out hasn't. But I think the imaginative visionary is the person in the room who is never short of an idea. They can sit around and talk about those ideas forever. And I know for me anyway, I'll get 6 different ideas, or I'll see the completed picture that needs to be done yesterday, and then get frustrated and feel like a failure because it's not done yesterday, even though I just thought of it right this second. Like, oh my gosh, I should have thought of this before. And then, get overwhelmed and not follow through because it's too much.
Yeah.
As opposed to either learning to cull down those ideas to the one and then committing to it, or like you said, building a team around that can help to execute. But also, this was something that I did not learn until very much later. I felt like because I came up with the ideas, or because I had ideas, that I had to be the one to execute them, that I had to do it all by myself, that I should be good at administration and marketing and pulling people together and managing people and managing events. Like those are the real, to me, like those are the real things. Those people do real things, and they have real skills that I didn't have. And I thought everybody thought like me. Anybody can do that. So realizing that okay, the way that I think, I do bring something to the party, and that's enough. And then it's also creating opportunities for other people to bring their skills and gifts into it as well, and to partner together to create something bigger than even whatever my original brilliant idea was, that it's going to be better with other people.
So we talked about the motivation and we've discussed some of the challenges. Now, what are the things that this archetype could use to thrive?
Right. Well, we'll start with the one that's for everyone, which is obviously developing strong spiritual practices and a really clear sense of identity, who you are in Christ, and developing a framework, a system, disciplines, relationships, all of those things that are going to help you go deep and have that solidly grounded.
Yeah, I mean, that is very important, but I'm wondering like how you curate that and make that a major importance.
Well, it obviously, like anything, it takes intentionality and looking for people who are really willing to go where you're wanting to go. I mean, this is like we've created things like spiritual collectives
Right.
through Convergence, and we're getting ready to start some groups for soul makers to look for a small group of people who almost like this peer mentoring, to be really willing to be vulnerable with each other, but to be serious about your spiritual life together. You want to find people who aren't afraid to be vulnerable and talk about what's really going on in their lives and not to be competing with each other, but also people who are going to hold you accountable for who you say you want to be and what you want to do. To find that, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people. In fact, it probably won't be a lot of people.
Right.
One or two other people that you can really be in that kind of relationship with. But then it takes the discipline of creating habits. And habit is not a bad word. It's not a nasty word. It's a good word. Like habits are the things that can help you. You do something small day after day after day that gets you in the long run to where you want to go. And I think for an imaginative visionary, that works on both a spiritual level and on the proficiency of craft. Like in order to get where you want to go, you do have to put in the time to develop the skills that you need to get you where you want to go. So I think those are the two of the things. They also happen to be some of the principles that we talk about for soul makers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'd say for the imaginative visionary, the driving force is really vision, vision, mission, this idea of, something bigger. So having clarity around that of where your values are and what's really, really important to you will help you to make choices between all those different ideas so that you can find one. And I think the encouragement there is to go for the thing that really excites you, that you really feel that call and that move, not to be afraid of that big idea that other people don't get, especially when you feel this like spirit movement to just go for it and understand that you will face criticism and rejection and all of those kinds of things, which is again why it's great to have a relationships with people who can support you in that, but to understand that uncomfortable place is a natural space for you. That's probably just where you're going to live. And so finding ways to take care of yourself and feel supported and feel like even when people don't get it around you, that doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path. I think that's a really, really important piece to be aware of and to make sure you kind of almost protect yourself in that way, to have that kind of confidence to be able to go forward. So this has kind of been an overview of the Imaginative Visionary. You can learn more on our website. You can take the quiz, the Archetypes quiz, and find out what archetype you are and learn about your motivations. See if that resonates for you as you read through it. See, does this speak to you about what motivates you? And are there other things that kind of pop to mind? And maybe look at the challenges and see if there are challenges that really are where you are struggling right now, or maybe there are things to look out for in the future. And then take a look at some of the ways that we've listed for how you can thrive in that, and some of the resources and tools that we have available through Be, Make, Do, and Soul Makers to help you in that. Next time that we get together, we're going to be talking with Eric Loxmo. He scored as an Imaginative Visionary, so we sat down to talk with him about what motivates him and some of the challenges that he's had over the course of his career. So be sure to listen next time as we talk in depth with somebody who scored as the Imaginative Visionary in the Archetypes quiz. And I hope that you'll join us for the rest of the series as we explore the archetypes and what motivates you to do what you were created to do, to make what you were created to make, and to be what you were created to be. You like that? I switched that around there.
You did. That was really good. That's not even scripted.
I know. Yeah. All right. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Be, Make, Do, a Soul Makers podcast. All links and resources are located in our show notes. Want to know your artist archetype? Take the quiz at soulmakers.org/quiz.